Biden in Philly talking economics there among voters, but he is talking about Israel. We want to listen and see what he has to say.
Stands with Israel. The United States stands with Israel. Secretary of State Blinken was in Israel yesterday, and Secretary of Defense Austin is there today. We're making sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself and respond to these attacks. It's also a priority for me to urgently address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. At my direction, our teams are working in the region, including communicating directly with the governments of Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and other Arab nations, and the United Nations to surge support and humanitarian consequences for Hamas attack to help Israel. You know, we can't lose sight of the fact that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians had nothing to do with Hamas and Hamas's appalling attacks, and they're suffering as a result as well. This morning, I spoke with the family members of all those Americans who are still unaccounted for on a Zoom call for about an hour and 10, 15 minutes. They're going through agony, not knowing what the status of their sons, daughters, husbands, wives, children are. You know, it's gut-wrenching. I assured them my personal commitment to do everything possible to return every missing American to their families. We're working round the clock to secure the release of Americans held by Hamas in close cooperation with Israel and our partners around the region. We're not going to stop till we bring them home. Folks, now for the reason to be here. Secretary Granholm, no one's more enthusiastic about building our clean energy future than you are. And I got so many friends here today. Pennsylvania delegation, Josh Shapiro, Governor, Mayor Kenny's an old friend, one of my closest friends in the Senate and in politics, Bobby Casey. Representative Brendan Boyle is always there. And I have Governor John Carney from Delaware and Tom Carper, two of the best people I've ever worked with. And New Jersey delegation, Donald Norcross. I kid Donald all the time that Delaware is small, but we own the Delaware River up at the high water mark in New Jersey. By the way, there's a lawsuit that actually happened. Anyway. But and he couldn't be here, but Cory Booker is a good friend, and who's on the ground in Israel. And when the attacks occurred, from everything he's doing to support the people of Israel. And I also want to thank him for pushing so hard for the projects we're about to talk about. And Governor Phil Murphy couldn't be here, but he's also a strong, strong supporter. And one thing before we get started, let's go Phillies. You watch that game last night? Yo! Between the Phillies and Eagles, man, it's a good year, man. This is a good year. We're going to win the series.
Of course, the president is going to talk about Philadelphia and the sports teams while talking about the economy. He's there in Philly talking about good-paying union jobs, investing in America, building clean energy for the future. But we were waiting to see if he did talk about Israel, and he did, saying that he is doing a lot right now to free American hostages, that he hasn't given up hope. And they are in this for the long haul. Selena Wang has also been listening in. She joins us now from the White House. It was short, it was brief, but it was to the point.
It was, and Kira, we heard him reiterate that staunch support for Israel, but he also highlighted the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And we've been hearing the emphasis from the White House as well, saying, look, the Palestinians, they did nothing wrong, and the Palestinian civilians are going to have huge devastations because of this. We know that the White House has been pushing for a safe passage for civilians, and we heard the president and the White House, they have been emphasizing they are aggressively working with their Israeli counterparts, their other partners in the region to try and get this to happen. However, as far as the White House has told us lately, there is no status update on that safe passage out. Now, the president also talked about that phone call he had, an emotional phone call. He had a long one with the families of those 14 Americans who are still missing. We also know that there are less than a handful, according to the White House, of Americans who are being held hostage. The president there saying he's doing everything he can to try and rescue them. The latest we know is that the U.S. has sent experts to the region to try and work on those hostage rescue efforts. Kira.
And we reported on the small raids already taking place there within Gaza. Our military analysts telling us they believe that those are efforts, Selena, to track down those hostages, hopefully bring them home, also take out the cells of Hamas terrorists, destroying weapons. But just, moving forward, as the president does continue to campaign, he does have this war in the forefront here on his mind. What more do we know about other assets possibly that he'll be sending in besides two of his big guns, the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense, both touching down in the region, talking with global partners? But, we still have the carrier, the Navy carrier out there in the waters on the edges of this conflict in the region. Another carrier heading out already was supposed to head out into the region, but that could be possibly two naval carriers. Of course, the president did say, and so did John Kirby, that there will not be U.S. boots on the ground. But does that necessarily X out an air war or air support?
Well, Kira, this is already shaping up to be one of the most challenging crises, geopolitical challenges of the Biden presidency. And to your point, this is multi-fronts that he has to be aware of. Not only is it about sending more assets to Israel, showing that symbolic support, but it's also about deterrence. So when you talk about that possible second aircraft carrier headed towards the region, that is about telling other players, specifically Iran, Hezbollah, those who are hostile to Israel, do not get involved, do not take advantage of the situation. In addition to that, he also has this huge task on his hand around the American civilians there, the hostages. We've also learned that the White House said the first U.S. charter flight to evacuate Americans from Israel has now departed the country, but still unclear just how far, just how long the president is willing to go to get those hostages out. It's a very, very delicate situation. The White House not even providing specific numbers because their guidance is always changing, Kira.
And what more do we know about these flights? John Kirby has talked about it twice now. We did hear Karine Jean-Pierre mention it in one of the briefings, the evacuation flights, and that the U.S. would be providing flights for those that wanted to get out of the country, but they would have to pay back the State Department. Can you clarify what the scenario or the situation is with regard to those flights to get people out of country?
Well, Kira, right now we know that the first U.S. charter flight to evacuate Americans from Israel has departed the country, and now it is en route to Europe. But the White House has declined to say exactly where in Europe. But this is clearly a top priority of the president, and he is telling these families, for the Americans who are still missing, that they're doing everything they can to try and rescue them, working around the clock. And again, on that safe passage, we also learned, according to an official, that while the U.S. and Israel, they have been doing a lot of coordination to try and lessen the civilian deaths, well, we also learned that Israel apparently did not give the United States a heads up on mass evacuation. Now, the order from Israel for that mass evacuation, it has come under intense scrutiny from human rights organizations and the General Secretary of the UN condemning it and saying that it would be extremely dangerous, and in some cases, he said, simply not possible. This was in remarks to reporters just this afternoon from the UN Secretary General.
So as we see the president basically out on the campaign trail now, while this conflict is taking place in Israel, and we don't know how long this is going to go for, Selena, and it's there are people dying on both sides, and there is now fear of all this anti-Semitic rhetoric online and these hate groups joining that cry to get involved in the killing and praising a lot of the killing. There's been kind of a back and forth between DHS, both active and outside of the Department of Homeland Security, saying we should be concerned about terrorist threats here in the U.S., while others are saying, no, there's no credible evidence that we should be worried about any type of attack on the homeland. Where do you think things stand with the White House right now, with just the rhetoric and the hate we've been seeing online among these hate groups? And is there a real life threat to synagogues, to schools here as, by the way, many of them adding more security to churches and synagogues and schools? What's your take on how real that threat is here in the U.S.? You know, what's the White House saying?
Well, Kira, I think one way to answer part of your question is I actually just got off an airplane from Cambridge, Massachusetts. I was on the campus of Harvard, and a microcosm of all that tension and all those risks you're talking about are actually happening on college campuses right now. It's really become a flashpoint. There has been protests, there have been clashes, tough rhetoric from students who have personal ties to this issue, and the political discourse there is getting extremely heated. Just at Harvard, for instance, they are significantly ramping up security. There were police cars throughout the campus, including one stationed outside of Harvard Hillel, which is the center of Jewish life on campus, and the university. So far, it has been safe, but they are ramping up. The officers there are clearly on high alert for what could transpire. The students there, they are feeling very hurt. A lot of the controversy happened after there was a statement released by more than 30 student groups who are part of the Palestinian solidarity groups, and it was not taken well. A lot of international and national backlash from that, from prominent lawmakers, CEOs, as well as professors on campus. And now students, after that, they are getting harassed, targeted, doxxed on both sides, Jewish students as well as Palestinian students, Muslim students, even those who are not involved in this said statement. The situation is extremely tense, but I did go to a silent vigil that was to mourn all civilian lives lost. It was very peaceful, but people are grieving, they're hurting. This is a nation that is in pain right now, and there's deep divisions, not just on college campuses, but across the country.
All right, Selena from the White House, thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.